Right. All right.
Ah,
Good
dito.
afternoon, everyone. It's nice to see you all again po. Welcome to the second webinar episode of Leaders for Excellence in Public Service or LEAP Mayor's Fellowship Program. Last June 13, we successfully launched the first of the series where we learned from Dr. Brian Lim yung mga strategies and factors to consider in redesigning the new normal. For our webinar for today, we will be discussing best practices in COVID response. So later on, our invited speakers will share their game plan, projects, and program in their battle plan to sa addressing the public health emergency. So to begin the program, we are pleased to have with us this afternoon our partner who has been supporting LEAP Mayor's Fellowship Program since the very beginning. So to give his opening remarks, please help me welcome from the Government Affairs Group of San Miguel Corporation, Mr. Vincent P. Pigson.
Hi, Winona. Thank you. Senator Win Gatchalian, my idol. Harvey and the staff of Kaya Natin. Our dear mayors, good afternoon. Kumusta po tayong lahat? I hope you are all healthy and doing well. Nakakamiss po yung mga unang panahon kung saan yung LEAP program natin was being held in Microtel or in Gen Hotel. Ganun pa man, tuloy pa rin ang buhay sa gitna ng pandemic at dapat hindi ito maging hadlang sa ating mga learning initiatives as leaders. So first of all, we at San Miguel Corporation would like to thank all of our participants for joining this program. We are happy to see you again. Yung iba dito, old-timers. I believe may mga bago din na members this module. Your attendance today is again proof that the country is not lacking in local chief executives who desire to be and who exemplify good governance and ethical leadership. Once again, we would like to thank Harvey and the rest of the Kaya Natin team for making us a lead partner again. San Miguel has always supported Kaya Natin's vision for better leaders. This pandemic has challenged even the best of our LGUs, and we hope this session will somehow help you deal with this crisis. In a survey done by Publicus Asia some weeks ago, they asked the constituents of Metro Manila LGUs to indicate their level of approval or disapproval with the manner in which their mayors responded to the pandemic. Alam niyo po ba kung sino yung top 2 LGUs that garnered the highest approval ratings? It was Valenzuela City and Pasig City. So I guess we have to thank Senator Win Gatchalian kasi I'm sure karamihan ng inumpisan niya sa Valenzuela ay pinagpapatuloy ngayon ng kapatid niya si Mayor Rex. So salute po, Senator Win. According to the survey, the people found the programs implemented by these mayors as being responsive and appropriate to the occasion. After looking at their programs, I noticed a pattern between these two cities. A lot of the projects they implemented during the pandemic were innovative. They were out-of-the-box solutions for a crisis we have not encountered before. May ilang programs na pareho na-implement sa dalawang cities. In fact, Mayor Vico Soto of Pasig publicly acknowledged that he copied some programs of Mayor Rex Gatchalian in Valenzuela because that he saw that it was good. Kaya mga mayors, huwag ho tayo mahiyang manggaya ng proyekto ng ibang mayor kung ito ay makakabuti sa ating mga kababayan. Sa classroom lang po bawal mangopya. At may isa pa pong bawal sa classroom ayon kay Kim Chiu. Ito ay bawal lumabas. Among the projects implemented by these cities are the mobile palengke, barangay coding scheme, using their motels in the LGUs as quarantine facilities, using the jobless tricycle drivers as transportation for people needing medical help, like those undergoing dialysis, giving food coupons to be used in sari-sari stores, instead of giving relief goods. In this way, nagkakaroon ng livelihood yung mga sari-sari store owners, giving allowances to students as well as supplemental SAP. Yes, some of these might cost money, but most of them do not, and these are the ones that are best appreciated by their constituents. Sa bahagi naman po ng San Miguel, through the leadership of our President, Mr. Ramon Ang, we also resort to innovation in order to help our kababayans more. We repurposed our Ginebra San Miguel plants to produce rubbing alcohol instead of drinking alcohol. Our food group revived the formula and produced Nutribans to be given to LGUs. We transformed some of our Petron stations into Kadiwa stores so farmers may be able to sell their fruits and vegetables. And we were able to extend the use of our disinfectant products usually used for our hog and poultry farms to be used in hospitals. So I hope that as we continue to deal with this pandemic, we try to be innovative in our solutions in order to be able to provide better quality of life for our constituents. Muli, maraming salamat at patuloy po tayo maging inspiring champions ng transparent and ethical leadership. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sir Steve. Maraming salamat din po sa San Miguel Corporation sa laging pagsuporta sa LEAP and for being our partner in good governance. Now, before we welcome our first speaker, we would like to share a few guidelines on our question and answer portion later. So, kung meron po kayong mga katanungan sa ating speaker mamaya, you may send your question using the Q&A feature here on Zoom. So, even though the discussion is still ongoing, you can send in and type your question there. And after the discussion of our speaker, we will compile all of your questions and our speaker will answer. Lastly, we are live on Facebook through Kaya Natin Movement's official Facebook page. So if you have constituents and staff who want to join the discussion, please share them the link through facebook.com/Kaya Natin page. Alright, so now that all our mayor fellows are excited and ready to listen to the best COVID response practices, we will now introduce our first speaker. He is the former representative of the 1st District of Valenzuela. He also championed good governance in his 9 years of public service as mayor of the local government of Valenzuela City. Previously, he served as chairman of the Senate Committee on Energy and Economic Affairs during the 17th Congress. And now, in the 18th Congress, he is the chairman of the Senate Committee on Basic Education and Arts and Culture. Please welcome Senator of the Republic of the Philippines, the Honorable Sherwin Gatchalian.
Thank you. Thank you for the kind introduction. Good afternoon, everyone, and good afternoon, Harvey. Thank you for inviting me to this event. And thank you rin kay Steve. Alam niyo po kami ni Steve, matagal na ho kami magkaibigan. If you don't know, ang San Miguel po, I think the second biggest plant of San Miguel is in Valenzuela. And when I was a mayor, si Steve na po yung government liaison officer. So madalas po akong pinapadala ng beer. Kaya tuwan-tuwa naman ako, naloko naman ako ni Steve doon. But good afternoon to the mayors. I hope everyone's doing well. I can see Mayor Joseph Ascucha nandito. Good afternoon, Mayor. Tagal na tayo hindi nakikita. And good afternoon to all of the panelists also. Today I was given an assignment of, Harvey gave me an assignment to discuss the best practices of Valenzuela. But I think that can be better articulated by Mayor Rex himself, who has been your guest, I think a few weeks back. So what I want to discuss basically is a broader learning from the pandemic, kung ano po yung natutunan ko personally, considering that I'm a legislator and a lot of the execution on the ground is being done by the mayors and the governors. But the first 3 months of the lockdown, I spent almost every day doon po sa command center namin sa Valenzuela. And the reason for that is to learn what's happening and to learn about this pandemic. The last time nagkaroon ho tayo ng pandemic scare, I don't know kung natandaan nyo, yung SARS, which is about 10 years ago. Mayor po ako noon eh. And I remember there was this alert na baka pumasok in SARS, and we in the LGU prepared to buy PPEs and everything, pero hindi naman natuloy yon. So itong pandemic na natuloy, itong COVID-19, presents also a good opportunity to all of us, no? Especially the mayors, on how to respond. We don't know whether this is once in a lifetime or this will happen again. Sana naman hindi, no? Next year or 5 years from now. But it's a good opportunity to learn how to respond, because at the end of the day, naniniwala po ako, ng LGU talaga ang gagalaw. In fact, yan po ay isa sa pinaka, I think, ay slow decision by national government by activating the LGUs. And I will show it to you later. I prepared a short presentation. Let me just share to everyone. Okay. Ito po yung ano. Okay. Can everyone, sorry. Let me just start from the beginning. Yan. Can everyone see it? Nakikita niyo po? Okay naman, no? All right. So let me just start off on where we are right now, no? Because it's important for all of us to learn kung nasaan na tayo and what is the situation. So right now, I'm sure you can see from the television and internet that there is a uptick of positive cases all over the country, specifically NCR and Region 7. And with that, oops, ano ba ito? Ayan. Para sa akin, I always look at the active cases because the positives might look big, but if you reduce the active cases dahil marami pong gumagaling, you'll see the true picture. But the true picture also is on an uptick. So a lot of people are saying, ito na ba yung second wave? Ito na ba o ito pa rin yung first wave? In fact, I asked our local health doctors, ang sabi nila, this is the second peak of the first wave. And marami pong interpretation kung ano nangyayari ngayon. In fact, kung narinig niyo ho si Secretary Duque, sabi niya nga, second wave na, third wave. It goes to show that this virus is so new that people don't know where we are right now. But it's important to look at the data because this will guide our decision making whether what type of quarantine we will implement in our locality. And I also look at the fresh cases. Alam mo, ang dami hong lumalabas. No? May late cases, fresh cases. But in late ho kasi, for me, is not an accurate picture. So I look at the fresh cases. And you can see also the fresh cases. There's a slow uptick, particularly in NCR and Region 7. So in short, tumataas po at dumadami po yung cases natin sa ating bansa. This slide is from Mr. Edson Guido of the data analyst of ABS-CBN. I suggest you follow him on Twitter because maganda po yung kanyang mga analysis. Another phenomena that I saw lately, yung recoveries natin tumataas. And two reasons for this. One is nagpalit po ng protocol ang DOH. One test na lang pwede nang lumabas. In fact, they also release protocol pag after 14 days tapos wala ka ng sakit, pwede ka nang lumabas. Ang nakikita ko rin kagandahan, yung number of deaths, mabagal yung increase. And this is a good thing. In fact, this is a very important slide that I want everyone to take note. Dati ho, nung una, if you look at March, kung gaano karami po yung positive, ganong karami rin yung namamatay. And that went on all the way to May. But we can see now that nag-decouple na ho, kahit na dumadaming cases, yung number of deaths hindi po lumalaki. So this is an important slide because we're now at the point whether itutuloy ba yung GCQ or papalitan ng MGCQ or iba pa. In my opinion, pwede na ho, the worst is to continue the GCQ, but we can slowly transition to MGCQ because the deaths are manageable. Ayaw natin sumipa, and that's kasi that's the time when our hospitals will be overwhelmed. In fact, we can see some improvements in ASEAN. Dati number 1 ho tayo, but now number 3 ho tayo in terms of number 2 tayo in terms of death, pero in terms of confirmed cases, we're number 3. Naunahan ho tayo ng Indonesia and Singapore. Pero may caveat ho dyan, no? Because Singapore is doing a lot of tests compared to us. So this is what I believed in from day one when the pandemic hit, that the fight against COVID-19 should be by house to house, street to street, barangay by barangay, city by city. And the LGUs should be capacitated and empowered to defeat the virus at the local level. Ang laban ho talaga local level. Hindi ho to kakayanin ng IATF alone or national government. And in fact, that policy changed in the middle of the game. If you remember ho, sa mga mayors, noong April 18, naglabas po ng resolution ang IATA. Sabi nila, LGU na ngayon na mangunguna. But from the beginning, January to early part of April, it was really national government. And mahirap dahil lahat ng test dadalhin natin sa IRTM. And it's impossible naman na buong Pilipinas, IRTM lang ang magte-test. So that radical shift is very important because I really believe that house to house po ang labanan ng COVID-19. And that's why in my almost 3 months in our command center, I studied the pandemic itself, not the virus. No? Hindi naman po ako doctor and hindi naman ako epidemiologist. But I studied the pandemic and how local government should react in times of pandemic. And there are several roles that the LGU should play. And this is probably within the ambit already of the local government code, but to make it more layman, ito po yung mga nakita kong importante importanteng papel na dapat gampanan ng mga LGUs in times of pandemic. Number 1 is study the pandemic. No? This is so new that kailangan pag-aralan natin how to react, paano nakakahawa to, paano kumakalat, so that we will know how the LGUs can respond. And number 2, we have to prepare. No? And this is where actually, I don't like to point fingers, no, but this is actually one of the shortcomings ng DOH dahil nung December pa lang alam na natin na kumakalat na ito, nung January pumasok na sa atin, pero hindi pa tayo nagbuo ng testing laboratories. And that's why it's important to study so that we know how to prepare, no? And that's what we did in Valenzuela. We studied carefully how to respond. And that's why later on I will show you what we put up in the first month of the pandemic. And then we have to enforce the quarantine measures. Ito po talagang nakikita natin kung gaano kahalaga po yung papel ng barangay. Dahil hindi naman po maaresto ni Mero lahat ng nag-iinuman o kumakalat. That's why the barangay is such an important component na importante ho na gumagalaw ho sila at ini-enforce po yung quarantine measures. In fact, dito ho sa Metro Manila may nakita akong downside. Ang dami hong malalaking barangay ho dito. For example, yung Bagong Silang, 200,000 in population. How can a barangay captain manage a 200,000 populated barangay? So we have to also look at some reform on how to make barangays manageable. And then, of course, constant communication to our constituents is very important. Kung ano pong ginagawa ng LGU, saan ho sila tatawag kung mayroon pong problema. Visibility is also very important to this type of pandemic. In fact, yung sinabi ni Steve kanina, nagkaroon ng ranking. Ang common denominator ng mga high-ranking LGUs dito sa Metro Manila is highly visible sila. Whether it's physical or social media, but highly visible ho sila. If you look at, tinignan ko ho yun at tinignan ko yung mabababa at yung matataas. Yung mga mabababa, ni social media presence, wala Kung walang social media presence, more so, hindi mo alam kung physically present sila sa pagre-responde. And lastly, data collection and analysis. This is also very important. And believe me, you have a lot of talent in your locality. Mga city health officers ho natin or municipal health officers, pag tinanong natin sila, alam nila kung paano i-analyze in data and ano yung mga importanteng measures para po mahinto natin yung pagkalat ng virus. So data collection is very important as well as analysis. And then this is what I call the old normal and new normal. Kasi alam niyo, marami ho sa mga programa existing na ho na kung ginawa ho natin, hindi ho tayo magkakaroon ng problema. I'll start off with social services. No? Yung community-based monitoring, this is already a law. And nung nagdi-distribute po ng SAP, alam naman ho natin gaano kahirap dahil 50% lang po ng families natin ay binigyan. Alam natin ibang ang mga low-income families umaabot sa 80%. Kami nga sa Valenzuela ho, 90% ang low-income families ho namin. So binigyan kami ng 50% pero ang humihingi po 90%. So it's really important to know who to give it to, and the community-based monitoring, which is a law, is the best mechanism on the ground para po malaman natin kung sino po ang low income, sino ang below poverty, at ano po yung kanilang katayuan. The National ID System is already also a law, pero hindi na-implement. This will avoid duplication. And yung cashless system, alam niyo, I really believe that one reform that we should do moving forward is to mandate opening of bank accounts from our constituents. And this is for their own good. No, dahil nakita ko nung sabi magbibigay ng ayuda sa mga driver, magbukas kayo ng bank account sa land bank, nagpila-pila during times of pandemic, which is quite inappropriate because nga ayaw natin sila lumabas ng bahay. So yung cashless system, the technology is already there, but moving forward, I can see that we have to mandate our constituents to do it. And nasabi ko nga kanina, manageable barangays. It's really impossible for a barangay captain to manage a 200,000 populated barangay. There's a law proposed by Congressman Barbers to automatically divide barangays into manageable size. Ako, suportado ako doon dahil nahirap talaga kung napakalaki po yung barangay. And then in the realm of public health po, dapat ho ang tinayo moving forward are regional testing centers. If you remember in the early part, IRTM lang nandoon. Lahat tayo pupunta IRTM, kaya pila-pilo, 10,000 po at one point yung nakapila ho doon. So we really need to devolve that so that the LGUs can tap into regional or even provincial testing centers kung malaki po ang kung marami po ang cases ho doon. And then itong contact tracing, this is such an important activity. Nakita namin sa Valenzuela. Pero hanggang ngayon ho, mano-mano. In fact, I will question the proposal of DOF dahil meron hong 25 billion proposal to hire people to do contact tracing. Pero ang contact tracing ho, kung mano-mano yan, naabot ho tayo, baka isang linggo, hindi pa natin mahanap. So it's important to automate it, to use technology. In Singapore, Taiwan, Korean, everything is used technology-driven. In yung isolation centers rin po, no? This is one thing that the LG should set up. The isolation centers is a way to not to lock down. Ngayon ho kasi kung may sakit, lockdown buong street, lockdown po buong sitio. But in Valenzuela, what we do is kung positive ka, dadaling ka namin sa isolation center. Kahit na mayaman ka ho, kahit mansion po yung bahay mo, dadalhin ho namin kayo sa isolation center. And that has been the protocol Valenzuela. Dahil kung nasa bahay ho sila, hindi natin monitor. Baka mahawa po yung kasambahay, mahawa po yung pamilya. And we noticed that yung hawaan sa amin, almost 70% are within their homes. So we came up with a protocol there that kahit na mayaman ka, nakikiusap kasi yung iba na sa bahay, dadaling ka namin sa isolation center para hindi makahawa. And now it's an accepted practice. Sa education naman po, since I'm the chairman of basic education, these are the things that we need to institutionalize. One is the learning continuity plan. I'm sure mga mayors naririnig nyo na yan kasi kinukulit na kayo ng supervisors and superintendent nyo. Itong learning continuity plan, ngayon lang ho lumabas yan. Patalam ho natin na calamities and disasters are normal occurrences in our country. And one of the things that I'm proposing as a reform is to make it institutionalized. So that kahit anong mangyari, hindi ho tayo naghahabol na nagpiprinting lang ngayon, tinetrain natin yung teachers natin. Then we need to train our teachers to distance learning. In fact, in other countries, distance learning already is part of their system. So that pag nagkaroon ng problema, mabilis mag-transition to distance learning. Hindi na natin titrain in teachers. training of the teacher takes so much time and effort. And third is embed online learning already slowly in our education system. Like I said, when ang pandemic strikes, hindi naman doon lang ho tayo magpe-prepare. We need to prepare early on. And one of the preparations in education that I want to propose is to already embed distance learning and online learning as a matter of modality. So I just want to share with everyone our experience in Valenzuela. One of the things that we set up right away in the first month of the lockdown was mass testing. And at that time, sabi namin ni Mayor Rex, mag-set up tayo ng lab. Pero natuklasan namin, to set up a lab is not easy because walang equipment, saan ka bibili ng equipment, sa abroad pa, yung supplies. So ang ginawa namin, we partnered with existing labs, the Medical City and other existing labs. So nag-sign ho kami ng MOA with them at sabi namin, i-allocate nyo kami ng capacity dahil doon namin dadalhin yung aming mga POIs and POM. So now we have about 465 per day capacity. Meron din kaming standby capacity with Red Cross and Philippine Arena. Ito po yung sinet up ng ni Vince Dizon sa Philippine Arena to test OFWs and other stranded workers. And we started our mass testing on April 11. And inuna ho namin yung lahat ng PUMs ho namin dahil sila yung na-expose. But we moved on to our frontliners, including barangays. And ito ho, I want the mayors to take note. Ngayon lang ho, when we, ito lang, the last 2 weeks nung nag-testing ho kami, ang aming positive cases sa mga barangays, umabot na ho ng mga 60 plus. No? And almost 90% of those are tanods. Siyempre ho, yung tanod natin exposed, saka yung tanod natin, kung iisipin nyo, sila yung mahilig magkwentuhan at magkumpul-kumpul. So it's important to test our barangays also. Not only our medical frontliners, but yung barangays importante because exposed ho sila. And right now we have already tested about 7%, 7,000 patients. That represents about 1.3% of our total population. And tuloy-tuloy pa rin ho yung aming testings. We're putting up our own molecular laboratory already in the process na ho yan. Hopefully by end of July, up and running na yan. What we want is to prepare for any eventuality, no? Whether kung magkaroon ng third wave pa, at least mabilis ho namin dalin yung testing, yung pagtetest ho namin dito. Hindi na ho kami pupunta doon sa mga private partners ho namin. And this is one of the strict policies of Valenzuela. Kung ikaw ay positive, dadaling ka namin dito. Dati, alam niyo, ang dami naming resistance, especially kung may kaya. Kasi sasabihin nila, pwede naman kami sa bahay, 3 naman yung kwarto ho namin doon. But the point is, government cannot monitor you. At doon po nangyayari yung hawaan. Ito po yung proposed drug rehabilitation center ho namin, but we converted it first to our isolation center. So dito ho namin dinadala yung mga isolation center ho namin. So we practice very basic principles. We test, we contact trace, and then we isolate you. And then, of course, we also have our own social amelioration response. Nagbigay ho kami ng close to 200,000 food packs all over the city. May mga ganitong areas pa ho kami, yung houses on stilts. And what we also found out is importante ho na tuloy-tuloy yung supply ng pagkain ng constituents natin. Alam na ng mayors natin to, no? And I'm sure you have better response compared to us, no? But one of the things that we learned is importante po, kahit hindi makakuha ng pera, but importante ho may pagkain. And that's why one of the things we propose to DSWD is to increase or give additional ERA allocation to our LGUs para may pangbili ho sila ng pagkain for their constituents. Kahit wala ng SAP, pero mabigyan po ng additional ERA for food and for social services ang LGU, hindi mahirapan po yung national government pagdating po sa pagkain. And one of the things that we implemented early part of this year, ito yung pass permit ho namin. Kasi ang goal ho namin, by end of the year, wala na hong pupunta ng City Hall for business permit, for RPT, and for engineering. Everything will be done online. So we call this a pass permit. We started off with our business permit. And alam niyo ho, medyo mabuti nga ho na start ho namin to because it became very useful this time. And since we don't allow people to go out of their houses, we now mandated them to use the pass permit to apply. So whether you are a San Miguel, alam ni Vince, ni Steve to, whether you are San Miguel or whether you are a small entrepreneur, mag-a-apply ko.
Senator Sherwin, can you test the audio po? Right. Thank you so much po, Senator Win Gatchalian, for your insights and for sharing po about the practices in COVID response. Now, pwede na pong mag-share or mag-ask ng questions ang ating Mayor Fellow.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes po.
Sorry, I had na-lobat tong earphones ko, but sorry.
Okay.
Na-lobat eh. Yeah, basically that's what we have been doing in Valenzuela. We didn't deviate from the traditional recommendation, which is to test, to treat. Ang ginawa lang ho namin, very strict kami sa isolation. And that's what we have been telling IATF, that the isolation. In fact, alam, sa China, very strict po doon. No? Sa pag nag-isolate ka sa central isolation. So again, thank you very much for the time, and thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you.
Thank you again po, Senator Win Gatchalian. Now po, we're moving on to the question and answer and dialogue portion. Mayor Marcel po of Barugo Leyte is raising her hand. Mayor Marcel?
Hi everyone, good afternoon. Hi Senator, good afternoon. I'm Mayor Marcel of Barugo Leyte. One of the municipalities na beneficiary nung, actually they do not call it as balik probinsya, rather it's hatid daw, hatid, not the balik, because in the balik, it's coupled with livelihood and everything and other program. But basically, what was done was the hatid dun sa mga locally stranded individuals and then including OFW. We have had no positive cases. It was just when Hati Provincia started that we started experiencing the positive cases now. Roughly, Region 8 test, parang there is now the declaration of National IATF that LIs should be held until after 14 days. We receive a DILG circular that there will be no more LSIs muna returning to Region 8 because of the high rise of the positive cases. Pero ano lang, fortunate because hindi naman yung mga severe, parang mild lang. nasimula. Ngayon, Senator, we are experiencing is backlog of the test ng PCR. This is one time when ever MC started the automation, but somehow parang I don't know, it was done and then they started to the manual. But fortunate, and in fact, Senator, we talked with, I was one of the participants when we had a discussion with the LMP
Data pinakorek
to send it to the former
kanang
Secretary Energy Petelia. Because we were fortunate, LMP were able to come up with a MOA with a private lab. And but we have the choice. Either we can have the private
Excuse me po, Mayor Marcel. I think meron pong interruption in your audio signal. Baka po you can type your question to Senator Win para po mas maintindihan natin.
Okay. Yung bali are now resorting to 14 days na lang because of the backlog of the CR, 14 quarantines sa municipio, then we step down na sa barangay na lang as the sub-test if that would just be feasible because backlog na ngayon yung PCR. So we're now resorting to basically ano na lang, quarantine for days sa munisipyo, step down 7 days sa barangay. And then I think, I don't know, Senator, we're most probably safe in allowing to be with their family because backlog in both stories. Kaya nga, papasana all ako dun sa presentation mo that you're coming up with your own laboratory test because we don't have the luxury here. So, ang ano ko lang, Senator, most probably ko, safe na ba rin yun? We're safe. For 10 days, municipal quarantine na lang, step down 7 days sa barangay na isolation, and then we can now allow them, though we are resort, bago lang kasi bago itong gagawin namin dahil nga sa backlog, we will just resort the rapid testing. Senator. Winonowit lang udyo.
Mayor, can you hear me? Mayor
Ngayon
Marcel?
lang po, Senator. Ngayon.
Yeah.
Now, I can hear now.
Yeah, Mayor Marcel, I know that early part na nagkaroon kayo ng teleconference with Mayor Rex. In fact, I was very impressed because ang ganda ng foresight nyo. Si Governor Petilia already foresaw the possibility of COVID landing into your island. And that's why I remember that you will be the LGU or the provincial LGU will set up their own lab, or they will be partnering with the private sector to set up their own lab. So so hindi ho kami nagla-lockdown. In fact, in Metro Manila, kami lang ho hindi pa nagla-lockdown ng sitio or barangay because masakit ho mag-lockdown. Maraming nahihirapan. So what we do is we take them out of their homes. Kahit na, sabi ko kanina, kahit na nakikiusap sa bahay nila, but we tell them we have to take you out from your homes. At naintindihan naman nila. So my point is you have to have access to testing facilities, whether you will use it or not. Importante naka-standby lang siya doon.
Senator, actually we were able to partner with private lab sila overwhelmed because of the LSIs coming to our town. And siguro lang ngayon, it started yesterday na we've requested na suspended muna for 10 days. And napakinggan naman, siguro lang dun siguro makakabawi-bawi kasi overwhelmed talaga yung facilities including the laboratories, Senator.
Yeah.
We have 2 laboratories here already. In fact, we have our own swabbers. Kasi after the talk with Mayor Rex, parang we came up na talagang it was the foresight na lahat ng LGUs ng Leyte, we have our own swabbers. We can just readily swab. Kaya lang, overwhelmed talaga ang laboratories. At saka, ang ano pa, Senator, ang nangyari ngayon, parang one of our tertiary hospital nagka-problema because of breach of protocol. Doon ang maraming affected na health personnel na isa sa nakadagdag doon sa mga pending na sa laboratory test. Kasi nga, ang naging priority, yung mga direct contact ng nagpa-positive na health personnel. So yun ang concern. In fact, a while ago, with the meeting with former secretary with our LMP president, kasi nga ang nangyayari, parang yung mga health personnel within our municipality, kinukuha sila swab. Unfortunately, after the swabbing, pinauwi sa bahay nila without even coordinating with the rest of, with us, the mayors, kung saan nakatira yung health personnel na swab nila. And then, we found out, like we have one katabi kong town na found out na nag-positive na patient na health personnel nandun sa bahay nila. Hindi pala siya naka-isolate. Even swinab, hindi rin siya naka-isolate, waiting for the result. Parang resolve namin kanina, we will be talking with Secretary Duque on the protocol of the DOH concerning the health personnel na sinasab without coordinating with the LGU. And then, even wala pang result, ina-allow to be with the family, hindi ina-isolate. And then, sinusundo na lang, pag positive na, saka lang ina-isolate. Na mas marami ang nagiging direct contact, and then we resort to contact tracing na, yun ang nagdagdag sa backlog ng both laboratories.
Correct. To be honest, Mayor, I salute the entire Leyte province for being proactive. Nakita nyo talaga na padating. In fact, I'm always telling the other senators, yung mga nakausap po namin ng mga probinsya, Leyte is the most proactive because, and I remember that as early as April yata, nag-set up na kayo ng lab eh. Wala pa kayong, I think wala pa kayong cases doon, konti pa lang yung cases. So,
wala pang case.
Parang wala pa, oo, wala pa. So, ganun,
wala pang case.
Ganun po kalayo yung foresight po ninyo. And that is important. In this pandemic, foresight is important eh. Kasi dahil yung lag time to set up the lab, matagal po talaga. Tsaka mahirap mag-set up.
Alright, thank you po Mayor Marcel. May iba pa po bang mayors na gustong mag-ask ng question? From Mayor Carlo, any updates daw po regarding the implementation of the Mandanas case and the increase of IRAs for LGUs?
Wala pa ho eh. Wala pa akong, we'll know that when budget season comes na. Which is September.
Okay. Next one naman po, si Mayor Jazz of Magallanes, Cavite.
Hi, Senator. Good afternoon.
Hi, Mayor Jazz.
You mentioned earlier that there would be learning continuity plan in education, and we should train and expose teachers to distance learning and embed online learning. As chair of the Committee on Basic Education, Arts, and Culture, are there concrete plans with regards to preparing or equipping our education system on coping with this pandemic situation? What can we expect, our dear Senator? Thank you.
Thank you for that question, Mayor Jess. That's a very good question. In fact, I'm sure na experience niyo ito ngayon dahil pinupuntahan kayo ng superintendent ninyo or ng supervisor. And DepEd unveiled their learning continuity plan the start of June. And even though it was formulated during the lockdown, but it was a reactive activity because of the pandemic. Pero I filed a bill in which it will institutionalize the learning continuity plan and also how to achieve the learning continuity plan. Because I'm sure na alam niyo rin, ang hirap i-implemento because number one, the teachers are not trained. Ngayon pa lang sila tinitrain. And alam naman natin yung internet connectivity all over the country is not perfect. Number two, yung mga bata walang internet connectivity. So bibigyan sila ng self-learning module na ipiprint. E saan kukuha ho ng pang-print ang mga superintendent at supervisor? Sa mga mayor rin. I'm sure lalapit sa inyo, hingi rin ng pang-print sa inyo. So my point of the matter, without a plan that is without a plan that has been formulated, nagiging reactive tayo at hindi tayo handa. Ang budget natin, hindi rin tayo handa. So, I filed this bill that it will institutionalize the learning continuity plan as well what I call the safe school system. Itong safe school system is an international practice in which they manage the risk of school and they manage the risk of the student. So kahit kung bumagyo o nagkaroon ng earthquake o nagkaroon na naman ng another pandemic, meron na tayong system at nakahanda ng LGU at DepEd. Hindi lang maghahanda siya kung nandoon na. So we have to already anticipate things like this can happen in the future. And we cannot just react because kawawa yung estudyante. For example, sabi sa amin hindi pa nakaka-print ng module. Kung hindi maka-print, no, o walang perang pang-print, di kawawa yung mga estudyante natin. Paano naman tuturuan? Lalo na kayo mga mayors natin are very education-oriented. Alam ko, passion nyo is making sure that our students learn. But without the tools for our students, mahirap. At admittedly, ngayon lang ginagawa lahat yan. So moving forward, what we have learned from this pandemic is just like NDRMC, na meron tayong NDRMC plan, we need to have a learning continuity plan and a safe school plan that will be formulated every year and that will be the document to prepare us in any eventuality. So learning will continue kahit na may pandemic.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Mayor Jazz. Is there anyone else po? Mayor Hermie.
Mayor, naka-mute. You're on mute.
Yes.
Okay. Good afternoon po, Senator Sherwin,
I guess.
Sir Harvey, and Mr. Steve, and to all the mayors. Sir, regarding din po sa education, yung luckily po dito sa San Gabriel, we have no case. We are one of the 3 municipalities in the District 1 of La Union na wala pang case ng COVID. The challenge for this now is yung pagbabalik po ng the new normal in our community, being a 4th-class mountainous municipality na indigenous cultural community po, Senator. So dito po sa sabi nyo kanina, embed online learning, maganda po yun, pero ito po yung challenge ko po dito because ang signal po sa mga upland communities namin, especially schools, wala po yan. And besides po, mahal yung mga Android, mga apps na pwedeng ma-access ng mga bata, even the teachers mismo is hirap. So ang kwan ko po, Senator, galing po kasi yung mga personnel ng DICT before 2017 dito sa bayan namin na supposedly were included for the free public wifi. And ang isang priority nga po doon, mga schools po, para hindi naman mahuli yung mga bata sa mga upland barangays namin. Pero that was 2017. Patapos na po yung 2020. Hindi ko alam kung saan po yung problema. So regarding naman po sa mga initiatives namin, dahil nga hindi magiging effective sa amin itong online, wala naman face-to-face na classes ordered ng DepEd po. So after a series po ng local school board namin, what we are doing now is buying risograph for mass production ng mga modules at saka mga skills works, mga worksheet po ng mga bata. And kanina lang po because I asked din Ma'am Nine Guevara and he referred me to Mayor Ramon Piang of UP na gusto ko rin po sana yung magkaroon ng LGU run or LGU co-own na radio station.
Oh, yeah.
I think Mayor Ramon sa UP po matagal na po yung community radio station nila. So for our particular situation po, I think magiging effective po yun dahil mas maganda po yung reach ng radio band, even our remote barangays, mas mura pa dahil transistor radio lang, walang mga loads, mga ganon. Saka mas stable po yung compared dito sa mga telecom signals na natin na unstable kung minsan. So, ganun po yung ginagawa ko po dito sa bayan namin na talagang medyo yun ang mabigat, how to get back itong pag-aaral ng mga bata. So, ang ko lang po, sir, kung I'll ask your help kung anong nangyari po dun sana sa DICT kung kailan magkakaroon ng
Very good question here. In fact, I filed a resolution nga to review that law kasi nga matagal na ang batas na yan. Wi-Fi on public places, parang 2 years, 3 years na yan. In fact, bago pa ako naging senator, parang alam ko, naging batas na yan. But hindi ko na-implement. In fact, I have a proposal nga ho, dahil tinignan ko ho yung mapa. Lahat ng barangay may elementary school. Halos lahat. So if we put a cell site or a Wi-Fi base in all elementary school, we're in effect putting cell sites or cell signal on all the barangays. But of course, that's a proposal pa lang. Ang punto ko lang naman doon sa embed online is this is a long-term activity na even in our public school, somehow we have to use online as a partial modality para kung meron nangyari, it's easy for the student to transition. Of course, it will not happen in the short term, no? But looking at the long term, DepEd should slowly reach that stage na mabilis mag-transition. I read that, of course, sa Europe to, no? In Netherlands, because nga, in Netherlands, nung tumama sa kanila yung COVID, in 2 days, they launch their online learning right away. Kasi nga lahat ng bata may computer, may connectivity, tsaka yung curriculum nila built for online. Dito sa atin, I think in the Philippine setting, tama ho kayo na we can use the traditional forms like radio, like TV, and somehow embed that in the curriculum. My point lang is, kasi ngayon naka-fixated tayo sa face-to-face. Pero kung meron tayong konting radio, konting TV, para mabilis mag-transition. Hindi tayo nahirapan pag ganitong nangyari. But I salute the mayors po. I know mayors po ang gumagalaw para masiguradong may modules yung ating mga estudyante. Alam naman natin mga superintendent natin kung may problema, takbuhan si mayor. But I know the mayors are really innovating to make sure that learning continues on the ground. Hindi yung naiiwanan ng mga estudyante natin.
Sige po. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the suggestion.
For our next question po will be coming from Mayor Riza.
Good afternoon, Senator.
Hello.
Hello. Good afternoon. Mayor Risa po from Alcantara, Romblon. With the influx of LSI coming to our province po, initially kasi what we are doing is RDT is being done at the ports or kaya po sa airport. Because of the changes in DOH protocols, kasi nga po 'di ba, RDT will only be sensitive or makakatch niya lang 5 days upon exposure. And subject for confirmation pa with the PCR. Is there a way po ba na kung sakali, kasi ang ginagawa namin, so yun nga po, binago po namin, RDT is being done on the 14th day ng or 14th day ng facility quarantine at sa barangay po yun. Considering po na kung may na-catch man siya sa barko or sa travel, magre-register po bago namin mailalabas for another 14-day home quarantine. Ngayon po sana mas maganda kung PCR will be available po in every province at lahat po ng dadating sa aming probinsya ay subject for PCR na po agad. So pagsundo sa ports or airports, PCR will be done yung pagsaswab. And then, diretso po sa isolation facility hanggang ma-release po yung result po sana. Kasi alam naman natin na confirmatory test pa rin po yung PCR. Actually, hindi nga talaga advisable yung RDT considering na magbibigay siya ng false negative results. Lalo na kung mas maaga siyang gagawin.
Correct. Mayor, wala pa kayong laboratory sa Romblon, no?
Senator, wala pa po, hindi pa po available. Lahat po ng aming swab test ay pino-forward pa po sa Manila, either San Lazaro or RITM. Kaya mga 5 to 7 days pa po bago dumating sa amin yung results.
Kaya barko.
Opo.
In fact, I was looking at my phone. Meron kasing mga province na COVID-free. I was looking at nawala, dati COVID-free ang Romblon pero nawala sa listahan. Ano?
Opo, nung isang gabi lang po nag-positive amin.
Kasi in 2 weeks ago when I looked at the list, andun na yung Romblon. When I looked at the list now, wala na. Nawala na yung Romblon. I read something in the internet. In Singapore, they already released a new protocol. After 14 days of strict quarantine, pwede ka nang tignan ng doktor. Kung ikaw ay wala ng symptoms, you can actually be released and be categorized as negative. DOH also released the same protocols. Of course, a lot of LGUs might feel uneasy kasi gusto mo pa rin i-test. But the best the best advice I can give Romblon is to quarantine talaga, maybe even longer than 14 days. Alam ko naging problema yung LSIs and to be honest about it, even though the intention of the LSI or yung paghatid ng LSI ay maganda, but yung procedure and protocols hindi airtight Kaya marami tayong mga LSI na positive tapos bumalik sa kanilang mga lugar, nagkahawa-hawa na. But let me take up your concern with Vince Dizon. Siya yung in charge ng mga testing. And I'll let him know na, kaya nga, in fact, even before during the Bayanihan one, we were telling DOH, kahit walang positive, mag-set up tayo ng provincial or kahit na regional man lang para kung mayroon man positive doon, mabilis ng mga LGUs, mabilis silang kumilos. Kasi kung dadaling pa ng Manila, tapos madidelay pa, napakahirap talagang kumilos. And we experienced that here in Valenzuela, yung importance ng quick testing and quick reaction. But I'll take that up, Mayor Risa, with Vince Dizon.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mayor Riza. After the next mayor po, maybe we can entertain 2 more questions. Right. Next po, Mayor Toyats of Motyong, Samar.
Hello, magandang hapon po, Senator Gatchalian. Ako po si Mayor Cabael ng munisipyo ng Motyong sa segundo distrito ng Samar. Meron lang po akong isasangguni sa inyo kasi diba, kayo po kasi yung chairman ng Committee on Education. Ang pangamba po natin, kasi dati pa, kahit face-to-face na nga yung pagtuturo ng mga teacher sa mga bata, nahihirapan pa silang matuto. Paano na po ngayon na blended learning na? Isa po yun sa aming pinangangambahan baga magkaroon po tayo ng mga estudyanteng hindi maganda ang kahihinatnan sa hinaharap dahil sa pandemyang ito. Ang ano ko lang, Senator, ano ba yung magagawa natin na tulong, lalong-lalo na dito sa, kasi alam natin masyadong mahina talaga yung internet, lalo na sa amin. At napangakuan kami before ng DICT na kakabitan, nasa amin na po yung infrastructure noon, yung mga equipment. Pero katulad nung isa kaninang mayor, hindi pa rin na-activate. 3 years na po namin hinihintay na i-activate, wala pa rin po hanggang ngayon. So ang ano lang natin, paano natin maaayos at masisiguro na dito sa blended learning, talagang matututo yung mga bata. Yun lang po yung aking isasangguni sa inyo, Senator.
Alam niyo, Mayor, yung tanong niyo, yan ang exactly yung tanong ko kay Yusek Dads of Yusek Dads San Antonio ng DepEd. Exactly the same po. Kasi nga, yung face-to-face na hirap na yung mga students, alam naman natin yung grades nila. Paano pa itong ganitong distance learning o blended learning? Wala pa akong kasagutan sa inyo ngayon, no? Because I also have a lot of doubts. Kaya nga ang fighting chance lang po natin ay ma-print po ng maayos yung self-learning module, ma-distribute po maayos, at yung mga teachers po natin ma-train ng maayos. That's the only fighting chance po natin. Dahil kung yung materials po kulang at yung teachers po hindi po train, talagang wala po tayong pag-asa. Yung estudyante po talaga mahirapang matuto. Ngayon meron po akong isang, of course ito suggestion lang sa mga mayors, to activate po yung mga pwedeng makatulong sa ating mga estudyante. For example po, yung mga retired teachers po natin or yung mga college students na nag-aaral po ng education na mag-tutor muna. Of course, subject to very strict protocols yan, no? Dahil senior citizen na or hindi pwede lumabas. But alam naman po natin, lalo na sa mga rural areas, mahirapan rin yung magulang magturo. Mahirapan yung magulang maging teacher. So kung meron tayong mga retired teacher or someone who can volunteer to maging tutor muna, yun ang pinakamaganda. It's a very difficult question. Tama ho kayo, Mayor. Absolutely correct. I asked the same question. But that answer is hindi pa natin. Kasi nga bago ito, that answer will be tested pa whether we will achieve what we want to achieve. Sabi ko nga sa DepEd, ang worst case scenario ito, we'll have one grade level na bagsak lahat na hindi papasa. Kasi we have to remember, itong gagawin natin ng DepEd at gagawin natin, itong distance learning, ang theory nito na matututo siya at pwede siyang tumaas sa next grade. So yung grade 1 magiging grade 2, grade 2 magiging grade 3. Paano kung hindi siya matuto? Diba? Di lahat sila parehong in grade 1 ulit next year. In grade 2 ulit next year. So that is the worst outcome. So rest assured, I'm monitoring this situation. It's very critical, itong situation. But again, no, ito pa, ulit-ulit ako. A lot of this innovation will come from the mayors. The LGUs will play a very important role again in the learning continuity plan. Kasi kayo lang makaka-assure na itong batang ito na tututo. Kung hindi natin ma-assure, wala talaga, hindi sila matututo.
Sana, Senator Win, matulungan din natin sa pamamagitan po ninyo na itong problema natin sa internet at talagang matutukan din ito kasi isa din ito sa makakatulong kung maganda yung ating infrastructure sa internet. At saka, Senator, pagdating po sa mga far-flung areas, yung mga barangays na kasi wala po talagang pagkakataon doon na magkaroon ng internet. Meron po kaming something like mga 20% ng aming, kasi meron kaming 30 barangays. So, ang 30% nun ay talagang nasa malayong area, wala pong mga internet doon. Siguro kung mapapayagan ng face-to-face na lang doon, very safe naman. Hindi rin namin papayagang pumunta yung mga teachers doon kung talagang hindi sila tested na na talagang makasiguro tayong hindi sila magiging dahilan na madadali na nila yung COVID sa far-flung areas. Siguro yun lang yun na talagang magkaroon ng face-to-face sa mga areas na talagang walang pagkakataon na madala natin yung internet doon. Saka napakahirap din lakarin noon, Senator. Maglalakad ng something like mga 5 to 6 hours para lang madala itong mga nakaprint na mga modules. Yun yung isang pinangangambahan namin sa ganitong sitwasyon.
Well, thank you for the feedback, Mayor. We'll bring it up with the ICT. Delayed na talaga itong internet in public places. Pero I read here sa chat kay Mayor Jazz that they are employing or gathering learning coaches who will be tutors to our students. So marami hong best practices, and I actually maganda ho yung idea ni Mayor Jazz. Maybe we can also request Harvey and Steve to organize a best practices on education naman. No, because definitely ang next activity po ng mga LGUs from August, actually ngayon and onwards, will be education. So it's good to have maybe a session of best practices sharing on education.
Very doable po yun, Senator, pagka Carline yung municipality. Pero pagkatulad po namin na upland lang, medyo mahirap yung mga ganyang gagawin na meron tayong coaches. Kasi estudyante po yung pinag-uusapan natin. Baka hindi po pumayag itong mga retired teachers na pumunta doon. Baka hindi na din nila kayaning maglakad papunta doon sa area.
Hindi naman retired teachers. Maybe we can tap into I don't know, daycare teachers or someone naman that we can be
yung kaya pang maglakad.
Kaya pang magturo. Importante, kaya magturo.
Alright, thank you po, Mayor Toya. And for our last question, may we call on Mayor Joseph. Mayor Joseph.
Naka-mute, Mayor.
Magandang hapon po, Senator.
Mayor, good to see you.
Apo, kumusta na po kayo? Kumusta na kayo?
Okay naman. Okay na, hindi na pabago itsura mo.
Naubos na po ang buhok. Ito po kasing bayan namin ay before, up to 2 months, wala po kaming incidents ng COVID dito sa amin. So after 2 months, nagkaroon kami ng 4. So isa yung namatay and then 3 yung wala na rin ngayon. Maayos na. Ang nangyayari lang po sa amin ay yung mga tao na galing sa Manila, they keep on coming to our province. At ito po ang nagdadala talaga ng infection dito sa aming lugar. Pwede po bang masabi natin sa national government na status ko muna tayo? Huwag muna nating pauwiin yung mga tao sa kanya-kanyang probinsya kasi parang nagkakalat lang siya ng infection Tapusin muna natin, pababain muna natin yung linya ng i-stabilize muna natin, and then after that saka natin pauwiin yung mga tao sa probinsya. Kasi kumakalat po talaga If there is a way na sana po ay ma-convince natin ang national government na huwag na muna nating implement, iwag muna nating pauwiin sa probinsya yung mga tao. Malaking tulong po ito sa aming mga nasa probinsya. And another thing, yun pong sinasabi ng mayor ng marami po kasing bayan na mayroong mga tinatawag natin GIDA barangays. Ito po yung mga geographically isolated areas na talaga naman po yung chance na magkaroon ng COVID ay hindi. Pwede po siguro ditong mag face to face na pagtuturo sa mga bata. Yun lamang po.
Mayor, doon sa LSI, yung mga LSI yung OFW or mga local na LSI talaga?
Meron pong OFW, meron din pong galing lang sa Manila, galing sa Cavite, galing sa Batangas, umuwi lang. Purely because maybe matagal na silang hindi nakausap pamilya. Some other LSIs nagsasabi sa amin, Gusto lang nilang magbakasyon and after that, babalik na naman sila sa kanilang pinanggalingan. Which is parang impractical na yun. Kasi nga, yung infection madadala nila dito sa lugar na.
Correct. I do agree, no, Mayor. Delicate talaga yung LSI dahil walang assurance kung negative sila o hindi. In fact, even though ginawa nila yung protocol dito, nakita ko may mga loopholes dahil pagdating doon, hindi naman sila natetest rin. So, I bring that up with Ayata, Mayor. Malaking concern talaga yan. Marami akong kausap ng mga mayors na naging concern. And yung mga zero naging positive ngayon. At syempre, i-access nila sa testing, hindi rin ganun kabilis. Unlike here in Manila, may access kami sa testing dito, mas mabilis. So, concern mo talaga yan that I'll take it up po with Ayata. Regarding po doon sa sinabi niyong yung mga areas wala naman, baka pwedeng ipagpatuloy. Ako, Mayor, I don't suggest that we should continue yet with our first face-to-face learning kasi talagang very malaro ang situation, very volatile. And may mga lugar nga, dati tinitignan ko yung zero COVID, 20 provinces, na-reduce into 9 na lang. Romblon nga, noong una nasa listahan of zero, naging nawala siya. So, very volatile ang situation at until may stabilize natin situation, I would suggest not to do face-to-face muna. So,
okay,
but take up yung LSI po dahil you're absolutely correct, no? Dahil kung hindi ma-test sila mabuti, kakalat lang. Mas mahirapan pa sa probinsya dahil walang testing capacities.
Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Mayor.
Right. Thank you so much po, Mayor Joseph, and thank you, Senator Win Gatchalian, for sharing your time po to discuss with our mayor fellows. Before we let you go po, may we ask for a virtual photo op with you, mayors? Baka po pwedeng i-on natin yung videos natin. Alright, ready po? We'll count to 3 po. 1, 2, 3. Okay, another one po. 1, 2, 3. Alright, maraming salamat po, Senator Win. Kung gusto niya na pong umalis, pwede pa rin po kayong magstay if you have time. May next speaker pa po tayo. And thank you po. Sana po sa susunod naming LEAP programs ay maimbitahan po namin kayo ulit. Maraming salamat po ulit. Alright, and dun po sa dialogue natin with Senator Gatchalian, nakita natin na marami po sa inyo na ang priority ay education talaga. Of course, we understand as mayors and as chairperson of the local school board, talagang priority niyo po talaga ang pag-mitigate ng impacts on education, especially at the time of the pandemic. That's why for our next speaker, meron po siyang ipipitch for a program which you can replicate in your own localities. And now we would like to introduce our next speaker. He formerly served as program manager of the Disaster Net project of the Harvard Humanitarian Initiative. He also served as the head executive assistant of the late Secretary Jesse M. Robredo of the Department of the Interior and Local Government. At present, he is the Chief of Staff at the Office of the Vice President of the Philippines. And to share about the Bayanihan para sa Distance Learning Initiative, please help me welcome Undersecretary Philip P.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction and magandang hapon po sa ating lahat. Senator Win, magandang hapon sa ating mga mayors, magandang hapon. Thank you so much again to Harvey and to Kaya Natin for this opportunity to talk about the latest initiative of the Office of the Vice President. On behalf of VP Lenny and the entire office, thank you for the opportunity. It's very interesting for me to note. Actually, in terms of the discussion, I was able to sit in during the discussion of Senator Win as well and the follow-up questions. And very noted na the mayors are really beginning to be quite worried about the preparations that are necessary to be put in place so that we can really give flesh to or implement yung binanggit nga po ni Senator Win na learning continuity plan that the DepEd has put forth. In terms of that, of course, the whole idea is that how do we really ensure that education continues to happen even during the more challenging realities that we face now that we're in the midst of a pandemic. When the vice president heard the pronouncement that there will really be no face-to-face instruction until a vaccine is discovered and found, automatically kinonvene na po kami within the office to think about how we can contribute in this sphere. As some of you might know, nasa ganung mode po talaga yung opisina namin ngayon. We're trying to look at one gap after another in terms of what needs to happen in the different facets that we have to address in terms of arresting the impact of the pandemic, whether that's in the realm of health or in the realm of economics, jobs, etc. And ito po yung latest initiative ng opisina, yung pagtingin kung paano ba kami makakatulong dun sa mga paghahanda at mga intervention nating mailunsad para makatulong dito sa issue na ito. And of course, in the learning continuity plan that the Department of Education released, as Senator Win mentioned a while ago, napakahalagang component doon yung distance learning. And when DepEd was talking about distance learning, they were very mindful, of course, na hindi talaga uubra or hindi possible yung online learning sa lahat ng areas in the country. That's why in the blended learning modality that they were discussing under distance learning, yung sa gitna po, yung online distance learning is just one component to that. The other components is yung katulad din po ng nabanggit in the course of the Q&A a while ago, yung looking at TV or radio-based instruction, at nandyan din po yung modular distance learning. Ito po yung pag-print ng mga learning materials on a regular or periodic basis para nauuwi ng mga estudyante at yun yung kanilang pwedeng gawin while they're at home. So when we looked at this landscape and asked ourselves, when the Vice President challenged the office to think of how can we contribute meaningfully to what needs to happen, tatlong different interventions po yung nakita namin na baka maaari naming tingnan. Yung una po, and ito po yung pinakauna na aming inilunsad, we came out with a call for donated, for old gadgets that are still usable so that we can distribute this to schools, to households, or to individual learners that would require it so that they have that access to gadgets for the distance learning modality. And dito actually, ang partner namin ulit, ang pinakasuki naming partner ay ang Kaya Natin at si Harvey. So we're partnering with Kaya Natin actually for the donation drive for the gadgets. At the start, we were just looking at gadgets in terms of tablets, laptops, old phones, etc. But very quickly, we also realized we need things like old printers, even things like old projectors, so that it can also dovetail with the other initiatives that I will be mentioning. So ongoing po itong gadget and equipment drive ng opisina, and we are continuing to source gadgets from not just individual donors, but even institutional donors like companies, again, in partnership with Kaya Natin. But when we started with the gadget donation drive, very quickly one realizes that the gadgets will not take you very far. Without connectivity and without the adequate programs, hindi rin masusulit or hindi rin mamaximize yung learning that could be facilitated through the gadgets. And because of that, and when we consulted with experts in the field, we consulted with people from the UP School of Education, for example, we consulted with officials in DepEd, both current officials as well as former officials, and we consulted with public school teachers themselves. And in the course of the consultations, two other initiatives were thought of. On the bottom right is how do we prepare teachers for distance learning? DepEd is also undergoing their own training with regard to this, but we realize na baka this is one aspect that we could also participate in. When we were speaking with a lot of public school teachers, it was very palpable and evident that the level of anxiety is already very high. In fact, they were telling us, banggitin lang po natin yung distance learning, parang natitrigger na talaga yung mga teachers because they're really looking for resources, they're really looking for support to be able to translate their lessons, to be able to translate their curriculum into this modality, into this distance learning modality. So we've been talking to a lot of production houses as well as subject matter experts, and the office is in the process of producing instructional videos to be able to help provide the training, to be able to provide the preparation that the teachers would require to be able to navigate how they will go about implementing distance learning under this new modality. And then the last intervention, which is really the main intervention that I wanted to talk about this afternoon, is this whole idea of setting up learning hubs in the community level. And the idea behind the learning hubs is that, and anyway, just to go through this slide po, the whole idea under these three initiatives is that hopefully by doing these things, we are able to help in addressing the needs of the learners and the teachers by making sure that they have access to the gadgets and equipment that they need for distance and blended learning. We are able to contribute to the capacity building and the learning for learning delivery that the teachers would require through the instructional videos. And then finally, create an opportunity where we could tap and mobilize communities for supporting the education that needs to continue to happen even in the midst of the pandemic by setting up community learning hubs. Yung pinaka-idea po behind the learning hub is that it will be a learning facility where students can go safely and in a conducive environment so that they can still get support for finishing whatever homework that's been assigned to them, for going through the lessons that they need to be able to undertake that will be assigned to them by their teachers. Very clear to us po na hindi po ito intended to be a substitute to the formal education in the schools. In fact, this is meant to be a supplement to us as the students go through what the DepEd issued as the minimum essential learning components. The idea po here is, can we mobilize volunteer tutors at the community level, at sila po yung magmaman ng ating mga community-based learning hubs so that may mapupuntahan pa rin yung ating mga learners na some kind of classroom or some kind of space para matulungan sila at ma-assist sila dun sa kanilang mga kailangan gawin or tapusin para sa paaralan. This particular modality became very important to us in the course of our consultations because the reality, and the mayors would know this better, is that the reality is that for most households or for most parents, they might not be in a position to provide the support that is necessary at home to make sure that learning continues to happen. Either because the parents are too caught up with work, too caught up with making ends meet and making sure that they get to provide the basic needs and requirements of their families, or the parents themselves don't have the support, the tools, and the capacities to be able to support the learning that their children will need to have at home. So yung intended beneficiaries po natin dito sa community learning hubs are, we were thinking na mag-focus po muna sa grades 1 to 6 for the incoming school year, with a special focus po dun sa mga katulad po ng nabanggit natin, possibly GIDA areas or learners that will find it very hard to access internet or to access the educational materials that they would need to have printed or that they would need to have in their gadgets if they will have access to gadgets. And then again, as I mentioned, learners whose home environments are not conducive for learning, or learners whose parents or guardians do not have the capacity or the adequate resources to be able to provide support to the lessons that need to take place at home. So nakikita namin is baka po ripe, baka hinog yung mga areas na mag-set up tayo sa community ng mga learning hubs if there is a high concentration of in-need learners and that it is fairly accessible to the learners. Of course, in the setting up of the community hubs, the idea is that of course, dapat hindi magko-commute yung mga students. It's really something finding strategic locations within communities, setting up a learning hub there, mobilizing volunteers, training volunteers to serve as tutors so that there is still a support mechanism at the community level beyond the support that we hope the learners would be able to have in their households na meron pa rin pong available support at the community level. Offhand, ito po yung mga nakikita namin na important requirements for setting up the learning hub. Of course, in terms of the physical requirements, dapat adequate po yung ating ilaw, yung lighting, hindi masyadong maingay, conducive siya for learning, may proper ventilation. You have the basic amenities that would be required like tables and chairs, yung access to supplies, access to the gadgets and connectivity, etc. So ito po yung mga requirements that our team that have brainstormed to look at this possible modality. Iniisip po namin na in terms of schedule, Mondays to Saturdays yung pwedeng maging schedule ng ating learning hub. Again, pwede ho natin sigurong i-cluster yung mga learners according to grade level at sila po yung magsama-sama for certain time periods within the schedule. And then of course, dapat yung ating mga protocols in terms of COVID ay nasusundan in terms of social distancing, proper disinfection, at yung iba pa pong mga ating measures na gusto nating i-ensure na nandun yung minimum health protocols. Iniisip namin po, talagang maliit lang at most 10 individuals yung nandun, 8 learners and tutors. Again, because we want to make sure that we are following the protocol in terms of health because we want these community hubs not only to be conducive interventions or conducive areas for learning, but also safe, especially with regard to that, with regard to the pandemic. Ito po yung nakikita namin kakailanganin in terms of the structure to be able to set something like this up. Of course, kailangan meron hong operations head that will be coordinating closely with the local government unit and the local school. Sila po yung magsusupervise dun sa mga volunteer tutors and making sure na yung overall schedule at overall ng operations ng ating community learning hub ay napapatupad alinsunod sa plano. Support staff niya po doon yung scheduler that would liaise with the parents and make sure that the schedule on a weekly basis is properly communicated. Na-imagine namin, for example, for learners po na mahihirapan kung parte po ng plano ng DepEd ay kailangan pumunta sa paaralan, yung mga walang access sa internet para makuha yung kanilang mga learning materials or makuha yung mga bago nilang worksheets na kailangan i-print. Yung isa ho namin na-imagine is baka pwedeng sa pakikipag-ugnayan ma-decentralize yon through setting up community learning hubs para mas mapalapit palalo sa mga learners yung kakailanganin nilang mga information at materials. Ang pinaka magiging lifeblood po ng ating community hubs will really be the tutors. So sila yung mag-i-ensure na mapaplano kung paano yung pag-support dun sa mga learners sa pagtapos ng homework nila or pag-go through ng lessons sila for that week. At the same time, sila po rin yung magdo-double dun sa lahat ng procedures for safety and disinfection na kailangan nating sundan para maging continuously safe environment yung ating learning hubs for learning. And then finally, of course, the learners as well. So yung key elements from our perspective na kailangan dito, yung OVP, again, nagawa po ng Office of the Vice President yung lahat po ng tulong at lahat po ng interventions na na-launch namin since the start of the quarantine, primarily because of the generosity of private sector partners. So yung magiging role po ng OVP dito is also to try to tap our networks, to try to tap our partners to be able to provide the support that might be necessary to be able to launch the community learning hubs at different localities and support the operational requirements. But of course, the tutors will be a key element. As I mentioned, they will be the lifeblood of the learning hubs, the parents and the guardians, the learners themselves, and of course, the local government unit. Napakahalaga po. Gusto ko pong susugan at reinforce yung in-emphasize ni Senator Win a while ago na for a lot of this talaga pong yung innovativeness tsaka yung courage po ng mga local government units in terms of experimenting and trying things out will be very critical for all these interventions to be successful. Unprecedented ho itong crisis na pinagdaraanan natin, and that's why it's really the time to be creative and the time to be innovative. And the local government units have time and again proven that they can be at the forefront of creative solutions when it comes to the many difficulties that we have to confront on behalf of our constituencies. So as far as the local government units are concerned, for the tutors po muna, again, part po ng maaaring ma-provide ng OVPs to make sure that there is support for the tutors in terms of onboarding them, training them, making sure that they have the necessary toolkits, necessary materials to assist them in the work, in the important work that they would have to do to make sure that learners will get support in their communities. Very important po yung role nila of how do they translate that curriculum that the DepEd has mandated into materials for tutoring in coordination with education experts. And of course, yung day-to-day operations po ng community hub, yung pag-register, yung pag-manage ng hub, pag-make sure na yung precautionary measures na susundan po natin, and yung actual act of tutoring, maliban pa po dun sa lahat ng iba pang managerial or administrative work that they would have to be doing. In terms of the LGU, kung meron pong mga LGU na magiging interesado to explore this in your localities or in your municipalities and cities, sa inyo po kami magde-defer in terms of identifying kung saan ba magiging strategic na magtayo ng isang community learning hub sa inyong munisipyo given these objectives. At makapaghanap rin siguro kung ano yung maaaring lugar na pwede nating tingnan na at mag-make sure na may access to electricity, may connectivity, at yung pagganap din po ng mga possible coordinators or tutors na maaari nating ma-mobilize for this. And yung, again, pag-ensure po ng security at yung pag-maintain dun sa ating community hub. And of course, yung pag-ensure din sa safety and security ng ating tutors and learners. Pagdating naman sa Office of the Vice President, again, ang OVP po laging partnership mode, partnership with the local government units, partnership with our different private sector partners. Kami po ay firm believer na kapag tayo ay nagtulungan, mas marami po tayong maraabot at mas marami po tayong matutulungan. Again, ang commitment po from our end, if this is something that you would like to explore in detail, we can put you in touch with our team directly so that we can have a more directed and particular discussion given the circumstances of your municipality or city. So tutulong po kami dun sa overall coordination and supervision ng project, pag-explain more fully sa ating mga LGU partners kung ano po yung what this would entail. Pwede rin po kaming tumulong, as I mentioned, dun sa pag-coordinate sa mga necessary stakeholders to be able to make this happen, including local DepEd and including possible local partners. For example, when we launched this initiative, a lot of yung mga cable operators po, meron pong mga network of cable operators that have gotten in touch with us and that have expressed interest to see whether they can help connect to the internet, for example, some of these community hubs, either at cost, at a really discounted cost, or kung posible, baka even in certain areas, if there is an active partner in their network that is there, baka po we could also explore arrangements where they could provide this pro bono for certain periods. Because connectivity, sa aming perspective po, mas madali kasi hong baka mas realistic at doable po yung i-ensure na meron tayong mga connected na community hubs kaysa mga connected na households at this point. Kaya kung makakapag-set up po tayo ng community hubs at part ng functionality ng community hub is makakapunta yung ating mga learners doon para makapag-connect sa internet, download everything they need, watch their online lessons. Malaking tulong din po yun. Kaya very important yung connectivity ng ating mga community hubs. Again, part of the commitment as well of the OVP is yung pag-assist in terms of implementation, yung continuous support and troubleshooting. And again, we're working po with experts as well in the field. We've been talking to groups, for example, that have been running after-school community centers for the longest time already para makuha rin po namin yung kanilang pointers and tips on how to go about running something like this. Yung last slide ko po is there are other modalities that we're looking at. Yung to the right po, yung isa ring tinitingnan namin are actually setting up learning hubs that are mobile. So to what extent can we retrofit a jeepney, for example, or another type of vehicle para doon natin ilo-load yung radyo, yung TV, yung mga laptop, etc. para maka-access siya lalo sa mga gida areas. Pwede siyang makapunta, may rotation yung schedule ng mobile learning hub para lang makapagdala ng connectivity at makapagdala ng tutors in certain areas at certain periods para nare-reach pa rin po natin even yung mga learners that are quite far flung. And then at the same time, of course, special considerations for special ed or yung mga persons with disability natin and the learners. So ito po yung isang tinitingnan ng Office of the Vice President. Palagay ko po lahat tayo are looking at August 24 as a red letter day in terms of how can we all work together to make sure that we are prepared, given that the right to education is a shared goal and value for all of us. How can we participate in making that happen? So for the Office of the Vice President, this is something that we're pursuing, and we'd love to, if this is of particular interest to any of the mayors here, we'd love to have a separate discussion po with your team to see to what extent we can work together. So muli, magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat. Salamat po sa pakikinig.
Thank you so much po, Yusek Boyet, for sharing about the Community Learning Hub Initiative. May mga nag-message na po sa akin privately expressing their interest to replicate this in their LGUs. Baka may mayors po tayo na gustong magtanong na ngayon. You may raise your hand po. Anybody po? Alright, Mayor Marcel, you have a question po.
Yeah. You said magtanong lang, is that feasible reaching Region 8, particularly Leyte, that you have discussed on the community-based learning,
Yes po.
community learning hub?
Yes, Mayor. It would really depend a lot, Mayor, on whether kung makapag-partner po tayo. Kasi very important and critical po yung role ng LGU in terms of, as I mentioned, first of all, being able to identify where is a suitable and strategic location to set up the hub. And more importantly, mobilizing the manpower and the tutors and the volunteers that would need to operate this. Pero yung team po namin ay nakikipag-sangguni na at nakikipag-ugnayan na with some experts, especially those that have run community centers that are focused on learning, para makapag-develop po tayo ng manual on how to operate something like this. So definitely, Mayor, it is meant to be replicable in different parts of the country as long as the right ingredients are there. The right location, the right volunteers that we can tap, and ensuring that our community hub has the minimum requirements, meet the minimum requirements for it to be operational in meeting the objectives that it sets out to do.
Kasi basically ngayon what is happening and most probably is being expected, we do not allow, kasi mali the setup here now, we are using the schools as our quarantine facility. In fact, we also use school as our isolation unit. So basically, there will be no physical appearance of students or pupils. And in fact, upon discussion of our school heads, they are now conducting an inventory, or most probably they will be coming a separate module. So most probably that can complement in the activities that they will be doing come August 24. But definitely schools cannot be used by them. But for identifying community or an area for to be used, we can, but definitely not the school, because basically this time we are utilizing the schools as our quarantine facility and in fact isolation area too. And August 24 is near, it will not be actually be free still. We will still be using the schools by then. Thank you, Yusef.
Thank you, Mayor. But you're absolutely correct, Mayor. The intention talaga po, since the idea is for this to be set up at the community level, is to not use the schools as much as possible. Kasi nga po, again, as I emphasized in the presentation, this is not meant to be a substitute to formal education by any means. It's meant to be a supplement to that. So baka mas maganda po na makahanap talaga ng suitable location. Again, if we are to follow social distancing guidelines at yung mga minimum health protocols, as long as the country is in a certain kind of quarantine, yun nga po, dapat hindi tayo lumampas ng 10 individuals, etc. So hindi actually ganong kalaki yung space requirement or yung physical requirement na kakailanganin for the community hubs. Kaya po hindi talaga din kinonsider na sa school siya gagawin. It's really looking at possible areas within communities na pwedeng i-convert muna for this purpose para lang po ma-ensure na may mapupuntahan yung ating mga bata at estudyante for the support that they need for their education.
Yeah.
Alright. Thank you po, Mayor Marcel. For our next question po, let's hear it from Mayor Riza.
Let's try the sea life.
Good afternoon, Yusek. In our town, katatapos lang po namin with the meeting with the local school board, and napagkasunduan po ay ang blended learning, yung modular distance learning and the TV-based instruction. We are interested in putting up a community learning hub, yung binanggit niyo po kanina. Paano ba kami makakuha ng assistance from the OVP? Meron po bang requirements na i-comply for the assistance po?
Mayor, mag-usap lang po tayo. Siguro ang ipapakiusap ko po sa kaya natin, yung lahat po ng nag-express ng interest na tingnan po at explore whether setting up something like this is doable and needed in your municipality or city. Kung pwedeng ma-forward sa amin yung contact information, magre-reach out po kami sa inyo, Mayor, para mapag-usapan, maupuan po namin together with our team that is in charge of this on how we can support you for setting up something like this.
Thank you so
But thank you so much, Mayor Riza, for your interest in setting up a community hub there in Romblon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you po, Mayor Riza. Sa lahat pa po ng mayors na interested sa Community Learning Hub, please message me lang po and we will link you to USEC Boyet and the OVP. For our next question po, from Mayor Jazz of Magallanes.
Hi, good afternoon, Yusek Philip.
Good afternoon, Mayor.
Ang question ko lang po, very nice po nitong project na ito, no? And this calls for the pandemic situation. Will the community learning hubs be accredited by the Department of Education, since we don't know yet exactly when this will end?
I think part po ng magiging important, Mayor, in setting this up and implementing is coordination with the local DepEd. Very clear po yun sa amin. And we've also made representations at DepEd at the national level to keep them up to speed that this is something that we are thinking of supporting and doing in partnership with localities. So ang assurance naman, Mayor Jazz, is that we're talking to DepEd regarding this. And so far, based on our discussion with them, they've also been very supportive. And they said na this is something that they think will be valuable. Particularly po for concerns like yung mga iba pong nabanggit ng DepEd, for example, when we spoke to them, napakalaking issue po, di ba? For example, how do you support non-readers or yung mga frustrated learners during this period? So malaking tulong na habang wala pang face-to-face instruction, meron pa ring mapupuntahan na some kind of center or hub para makakuha ng tulong yung ating mga non-readers or frustrated learners or yung mga learners na talagang will find it very difficult to do their lessons at home. So far naman po, supportive at the national level, and sisiguraduhin din po natin na makiki-coordinate tayo sa local DepEd when we set this up.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Yusek.
All right. Thank you po, Mayor Jazz. Anyone else po would like to ask or any feedback po? All right, if wala na po, we'll just send your contact details to OVP para po masimulan na ang inyong mga community learning hubs. And let's have another group photo po with Yusek Boyet. And I think nandito pa po si Senwin with us. All right, on po ulit tayo ng video. All right, 1, 2, 3. Another one po. 1, 2, 3. Alright. Once again, thank you so much po, Yusek Boyet. Excited na po kami na magkaroon ng community learning hubs ang ating LEAP mayors. And to officially end this webinar of LEAP preparing LGUs for the second wave of COVID, let's hear a message from the lead convener of Kaya Natin movement. Please welcome Mr. Harvey K.
Good afternoon sa mga mayors natin, and of course, again, thank you very much to Senator Win Gatchalian and Yusek Boyet. I've always admired the kind of work that Senator Win has done in Valenzuela City, and he continues to push for very good pieces of legislation. I think alam naman natin na napasa na yung isa sa kanyang mga pet legislation, yung good manners and right conduct na batas para sa ating mga kabataan. So everyone, it is now mandated by law that all students should undergo GMRC. Tamang-tama yon kasi that's very needed right now. Siyempre, we need to make sure that our children grow up with the right kind of character and values. So thank you, Senator Win. And we will invite you again, Senator Win, kasi by July, we will probably focus on education. So hopefully, you can still make yourself available to our mayors, especially as the DepEd firms its plans. Alam ko rin na malapit na ang budget hearing, so I am sure that you will have more access to DepEd. So we hope that you will be able to raise the concerns of our mayors to the proper officials. Thank you as well, of course, to my good friend, si Yusek Boyet D of OVP, our ever partner sa lahat ng mga programs ng Kaya Natin with regard to disaster relief, and of course right now in COVID-19 in this pandemic. We encourage all mayors here to engage with Yusek Boyet for setting up your community learning hubs in your respective municipalities and LGUs. The OVP is already starting to set up community learning hubs in areas that are here in Metro Manila. I think one of their pilot areas is with Mayor Vico Soto already of Pasig. So we'd like to also encourage all the mayors here to just let us know so that we can immediately inform OVP of your interest so that they can get in touch with you quickly. I think what I'd like to say is, of course, I'd like to also thank Steve, our friend from San Miguel Corporation. Thank you very much, San Miguel, for continuing to support our LEAP Fellowship Program for Mayors. Thank you very much, San Miguel, for all the help that you have given us for the past 5 years. So in the coming webinars, we hope that we will continue to learn more about how to deal with this pandemic, how to be able to do our very best to address the current situation that we are all encountering and going through. Mahaba pa to. Hindi ito kaagad-agad na mawawala. But I think we are making headway. We are learning important lessons. And I'd like to again stress what Senator Win a while ago said. Malaki talaga ang inaasahan sa mga local government officials. I think you know that. You've seen that the past 3.5 months that we have been going through this pandemic. We hope that all of our mayors here have learned a lot from our session today and that you will be able to implement what you've learned in your respective LGUs. Again, thank, of course, Winona, our KN staff who made this possible, who made the necessary preparations. We thank all of our mayors who made the time to join us in this session. And we hope that we will see you again in the coming weeks. Alam naman natin ang LEAP, every other week meron tayong session. And we hope to be able to provide more insightful, interesting speakers like Senator Win and Yusek Boyati for all of you. Again, to our speakers, to our mayors, maraming salamat. And we hope to see you again in our future events. Thank you and good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you very much po, Sir Harvey. Once again, salamat po, Sir Steve of San Miguel, Senator Win Gatchalian, and Yusek Boyet. Thank you as well to our LEAP mayors. Patuloy po tayong magsasama-sama sa next LEAP webinars. Our journey and fight against COVID-19 might still be long, pero kami po sa Kaya Natin ay lagi niyong makakasama as an ally. Thank you so much po and we'll see you in the next LEAP webinar. Ingat pong lahat.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Salamat
Thank you.
po.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone. Salamat.
Okay.